All right, welcome to another episode of In Bed with Books. I'm your host, Melissa, and today I'm going to be joined by author Noel Stark, whose book, Love, Camera, Action, just came out. So, Noel, do you want to introduce yourself and your book a little bit?
Yeah, hi. I'm Noel Stark, and my book Love, Camera, Action is it's a contemporary romance about a director and her director of photography set in, like kind of a Hollywood setting in a scripted TV show. And it's my debut novel, and I'm pretty darn excited about it.
Well, you should be because it was very hot.
Oh, cool.
Yes, yes. I do want to talk a little bit about the setting here. So, it's my understanding that you've worked in film.
Yeah, my day job is in film and TV. And oh my God, I've worked in so many different roles in film and
Okay.
TV, like from the lowest of the low to not the tippy top. Like I'm not an executive at a network or anything like that, but I've written, I've directed, I've acted, I've produced. I've been a production assistant, I've been a locations assistant, I've worked in casting, pretty much everything under the sun in terms of what happens on a TV show. I've done that job. So when I first got the bug to write a romance novel, I wanted to set it in a world that I didn't have to build because it was my first novel. So I wanted to focus on the structure and the characters and the love story and I didn't want to spend a lot of time world building. So I chose a world that I knew very well, which is TV.
Yeah, and I like it. So, what parts then, I guess since you worked in everything at this point, were there certain parts of like the behind the scenes that you knew you wanted to have in there to be like, I always see this done wrong and I want to like clear the air?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't see it very often. And that's one of the reasons what made me write it was because I'd read a lot of Hollywood romance and they're generally focused on the actors and sometimes the
Mhm.
writers, but they're never really set on in the crew. And I thought that was a really exciting and fertile ground to write about because when you're working on a TV show, it's a very intense experience.
Mhm.
You're working with these people 12, 14 hours a day. You're in this time, like not tiny, but a large enclosed space where you don't see daylight and you are very focused and you become this family on the crew that lasts for 1, 2, 3, 4 months and then it's disbanded. So it's very intense. And I thought that was a fun place to kind of explore. And it's also, very fantastical because they're making this show called The Demon. That's the
Yeah.
show that they're working on, which is a fantasy show based on a graphic novel within the world. And they have to shoot, hell scenes and they have to shoot
Mhm.
possessive scenes and or possession scenes and they have to shoot CIA scenes. So it's kind of fun and fantastical in that way that just gives a kind of a more interesting playground to write from.
And I liked that like as the book was going on, you could see these sets and you were like almost writing this whole show within the book, which was very exciting to kind of like put
Oh,
together and
cool.
like I'd have watched that show. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, that's funny. No one's asked that. So I'm really chuffed that you said that. But that it was like the show within the show.
Hmm.
What is that? And I was a big fan of Buffy when it came out, so I loved all
Yeah.
those shows. And there's a certain track that they take where one character seems to be a human and then you find out there's something else and there's a conspiracy behind it. So it was fun to kind of write the show within that show.
Hmm.
So I'm
Yeah,
glad you
and
noticed that.
yeah, it was fun. And
Mm.
that when the I can't remember what chapter it was, but when it was like Paolo's character, we find out isn't just a waiter, but is actually like an agent. But then
Mhm.
when he's getting really like artsy with it and he's like, "Did you like how I looked?" And I was like, "Oh my God." That would have been so I would have that was funny but frustrating, but reader
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Poor Paolo. He's kind of my comedic relief. in the book, but he's a character. He's one of the side characters.
Hmm.
He's an actor who has been chosen for his looks and no other reason. He's been chosen because he looks exactly the part. He's beautiful. He was scouted on a model shoot, and he's been thrust into this huge production, and he has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so what some people do is he chooses to hide behind a wall of arrogance and know-it-allness, and as a
Hmm.
result nobody really likes him because he's
Yeah.
kind of a pain.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny when we get Jory's chapters. There was like a stark difference between like Jory and Callie talking about him because Callie is like, "Oh, I get it. I've been there." And Jory is like, "I literally could not think lower of this man." And
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
so funny but frustrating to read. But have you, I guess you don't have to be like specific with who or what, but how much of the people that you met in the industry do you think got pulled into this?
Yeah, a ton for sure. A ton. And situations that I've been through as a director and as an actor. Callie's the lead in it, who is the director. She's very interested in actors. She really loves them because she knows that actors are delicate, vulnerable human beings, that even though they seem really gregarious and fun and that you can't break them, they're actually like scared little
Mhm.
rabbits who just want to please. And I know that because I was an actress and I
Yeah.
I felt that very specifically. And so Callie wants to make a really comfortable environment for the actors so that they can do their best. Now, Jory doesn't really deal with the actors because he's the camera guy. He's the director, the photographer. He decides on how the show looks. But he's frustrated because if the acting is crappy, then he has to adjust his camera. He
Yeah.
has to adjust his own work. And he's of the mind, which is very common. He's of the mind that actors are getting paid a lot of money to come in, and they should do their job and do it quickly and not
Hmm.
grumble. And there's some truth to that. Like they should do that, but it's not a science. It's a
And
creative endeavor, so it's hard to
yeah,
do that.
there's so many different, like, they're all different artists, even though there's like the very technical side of things. And I like that
Mhm.
you include a lot of that with like Jory's point of view and everything.
Mhm.
Um, but it's very hard when that artistic vision gets stomped on by another's artistic vision, which is part of the
Mhm.
conflict between Jory and Callie, and I love
Mhm.
that so much. I
Mhm.
love their tension when things start to ramp up a little bit. Um, so what parts of when you were like designing their love story, how you wanted it to progress, where did you know you were starting from? Like, how did you decide this was going to be the type of love story you were writing?
Well, God, everybody loves enemies to lovers, right?
Oh yeah.
Like it's so good.
Yes.
It's so good. I love it so much. So I kind of wanted to start from that. And because the director and the director of photography work so closely together, it's a very easy relationship to draw conflict from because they're both coming from different angles of what needs to get done. And in the best case scenario, it's very synergistic. And I think that's common. Like directors and directors of photography do work very well together. But when they don't, it's really hard. It's really hard. And Callie bases a lot of her decisions on inspiration. It's not that she's unprepared, she is prepared, but she really tries to look for like sudden inspiration and maybe a little bit of chaos just to find that magic.
Yeah.
And that just makes Jory nauseous. He can't stand it. He wants
Yeah.
to know exactly what's happening at every moment so he knows where to know where to put the camera, knows what's happening, and does not want to get into that world of Callie saying, what if we do this? He
Hmm.
hates it. And so then there's a little bit of that opposites of how to come about doing the show from those two people. And then, of
Hmm.
course, I really do think there's different ways that men and women communicate.
Yeah.
And so there's the difference in there that they have to learn from each other. She doesn't really have to learn how men communicate because she's surrounded by men all the
Yeah.
time. So she knows the gig. But he's not used to having a female director because honestly, they're quite rare. Well, not quite rare, but when I started writing this book, 7% of directors were women.
Oh my God.
And now they're at 12%.
Okay.
But even at 12%, it's going down. Like there's statistics that it's actually going back down.
Yeah.
So it's not there aren't a ton of women out there. So then Jory has to learn how to speak to someone differently. And that's a hard journey for him.
And there's also that moment when he explicitly, and I remember reading the chapter, the paragraph, and he's talking about like, when it's a guy director, we can just look at each other, and I'm thinking that's the issue. And then in the next line, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm part of the problem."
I'm
I
so
I
glad you
love,
felt that.
yeah, I was like, okay. And then he said that, and I was like, okay, this is like he sees it now,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
love that like that flip, the very clear like thought process there as he worked
That's
through
cool.
it.
I'm glad you noticed that because yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's a
No.
good guy. Like
Hmm.
he tries to get women into the camera department as much as he can. And
Hmm.
as few directors, female directors there are, it's even worse in the camera department.
Oh,
So
I'm sure.
he
Yeah.
tries, he's a champion for women to come into the camera department. So you know he's a good guy. He's just not used to being in this different environment because he's such a control freak. It's
Hmm.
hard for him to change. And so it's nice to see him realize, oh man, I'm the problem. Like you said, I'm the
Yeah.
problem. I got to fix this myself. It's not her, it's
Hmm.
me.
Hmm. And then one of the like recurring, I don't want to say themes, it's not really a theme, but like a recurring like motif, I guess, of the book is kind of post Me Too movement. So it's very
Hmm.
much like in our world, not just
Hmm.
like a vague, like,
Hmm.
romance something.
Hmm.
And he's very conscious of that. I like that. And I want to kind of talk about like how did you balance that without it? Because there's like they're playing with power dynamics in their once they get sexual,
Hmm.
and they are also like, his rule is like don't shit where you eat, immediately breaks that rule. And that's fine. I'm not complaining.
Ah,
But
yeah.
then how are you balancing that when you're writing? Like what are things that you were trying to keep in mind
Hmm.
throughout?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard because ultimately this is a rom-com. It's supposed to
Yeah.
be funny, it's supposed to be light. But I like a little bit of broccoli with my sugar, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I like it to be real. So, setting it post Me Too movement where everybody's kind of walking on eggshells and not sure of how to be with each other
Mhm.
anymore, which I think was a really good place for everybody to be. It was important to kind of
Yeah.
move out of that very inappropriate space that was happening before.
Yeah.
Um, but it's kind of I'm hoping some of the comedy comes from that awkwardness of like they're obviously very attracted to each other. They
Yeah.
know they should not be because it's bad for both of their careers. And so how do they manage that? And once they do start hooking up, how do they manage that? And it
Yeah.
becomes this kind of secret relationship and they're running around set being, bad and like sexy and fun, but it's like a terrible idea. So it's like throwing those kind of broccoli bits in with
Mhm.
the fun bits. And that's always important to me. Like when I read romance, I love it when I learn something or I love it when
Yeah.
I see a different perspective. I mean, I started a binge on romance maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, where I just started reading everything, a book every
Nice.
other day, like
Yeah.
hundreds a year. And I would read fantasy and sci-fi and Western and historical and all of it. And what I loved the most was seeing different perspectives from different
Mhm.
sexualities, from different races, from different people in time. And um, so I tried to infuse a little bit of that into my book, which again is supposed to be light and fun.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like if you hadn't included it, there would have been a part of me that was like, okay, this is like a pretty big thing to have omitted. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I like that. At least
Oh,
that it was
God.
like acknowledged, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. I know. I have the same thing. Sometimes I read books and I'm like, wait, what are they saying? What's the
Yeah.
situation? And I get annoyed. I lose a little bit of faith in the
Hmm.
author if it's not at least acknowledged.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
So then, okay, you've read a lot of romance. Let's talk about your reading history a little bit, especially like, writers have to read.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Was that like the beginning of what you would say is you being a harsh reader, like an aggressive reader, or does this go back years?
No, well, I mean, I was always a reader as a little kid, but my first dalliance in romance was my sister had romance novels, and she's much older than I am. She's 11 years older than me. So she would have all these historical romances in her bookshelf, and I would steal them and hide and read them and be scandalized and be like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, is that how that works? And, quite young, like 9, 10, 11, reading all these books. So I had a grounding in that. And then I went on, I read a lot of women's fic. I read a lot of um, sci-fi and fantasy and a lot of nonfiction too. And then I just hit this time. I was actually going through a really hard time in my life many years later, like decades later. I was going through a
Mhm.
really hard time. And I was walking by one of those, little book box like libraries people have outside their
Oh yeah,
house,
yeah.
and I just looked in there for kids books for my son, and then I saw a romance novel and I was like, I'm taking that, and I grabbed it. I read it in like 10 seconds and it just launched me into this place
Nice.
because I needed sort of a safe reading space because I was having
Hmm.
such a hard time in my life that I wanted to have something fun and
Yeah.
safe. And I knew no one was going to get hurt, or if they are going to get hurt, it's going to be good at the end. So it's
Yeah.
okay. So it not only helped me through that time, but it really launched me into this new world.
Is that when you decided you wanted to write then? Was kind of after that shift?
Yeah, I had zero interest in being a novelist. I
Okay.
had written TV stuff and I'd written films, but I had zero interest in being a novelist simply just because I had it put on a very high pedestal. I was like, there was no
Yeah.
way I could write one. But because I read so many romance novels and they seemed so fun and frothy and like
Hmm.
silly at times, I was like, oh, I can do one of those very naively. Very naively. It was so hard. It was so hard to write the first novel.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. I made so many mistakes, but eventually I got it to a place where it could be published.
Nice, nice. Yeah.
Mhm,
So then
mhm.
how does that translation look? If you're used to writing, you know, scripts, that's a very different style.
It is. It is. But because I had worked on so many different types of shows, like I'd done scripted, but I also have a lot of background in reality TV
Okay.
and all the different types of reality TV, renovation, ghost shows, true crime. And when you work on all these different formats, you begin to see the structure in things
Hmm.
because they differ from one to the next, but it's all kind of the same story structure. So because I was able to recognize the templates of it, I could look at a romance novel and say, oh, okay, so this happens then, and this happens then, and this happens then. So it gave me a structure to work on.
Hmm.
And then the rest, I was honestly just winging it, honestly.
What did you find to be like, I guess, the hardest part of making that transition?
Being emotional on the page.
Yeah.
Because in scripts, you're just writing the dialogue and you're writing actions, and the actors are supposed to fill that
Hmm.
void, that kind of emotional space with how they present the words. So I would often not include like where the people were thinking, how they were thinking
Hmm.
emotionally, because it was in my head. So obviously you guys should be able to know too,
Yeah.
right? So that was the hardest thing. It's still really hard. It's still really hard for me. Like
Okay.
dialogue, I can do no problem. Plot, I can do no problem, but the emotional richness of
Hmm.
characters, that takes a lot for me.
That's fair. That's fair. And what did you find helped open that up then?
Getting other people to read my stuff and pointing it out. Just
The
saying,
scary part.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the worst. It's the worst. You're like, this is fine. It's totally done. Read it. And they're like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's done. You have to do this, 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 and this. So, yeah, just other people pointing it out because honestly, I had no idea that that needed to be in the novel at certain
Yeah.
points. So it was good. It's always good to have other people look at your work and
Oh
people
yeah.
who know what they're doing. Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So then in creating these characters, there's a lot of trauma in their pasts.
Mm, mm.
How did you, I guess, for an easy way to say this, how did you decide that this was going to be the trauma that was going to like come together for the two of them? That this was going to shape who each other needed?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's hard. You kind of have to find ways that they'll complement their kind of trauma
Hmm.
will complement each other so that they can help each other at the end of the day. And you understand why they're helping each other
Hmm.
and why they're good for each other. And, I've written a couple of other novels that are in various stages right now, so I'm a little bit more focused on that. Like I
Yeah.
start from the beginning with that thought in mind. But when I
Hmm.
was writing this first one, I really didn't know. I was such a pantser in that way. And yeah, it took a lot of evolution of finding out what these characters were going through. So for Callie, for example, I wanted to be her be a self-starter. She didn't go to school. She learned from
Hmm.
the ground up, but she was youngish as a director. So then what had granted her that maturity and the maturity that she got was because she had a very difficult mother,
Hmm.
single mom, who had, depression issues and issues with, drugs and alcohol, like nothing super intense, but enough to really make Callie have to step up and look after
Yeah.
her little sister. And, when you're a writer, this is the problem with being friends with a writer. Be careful because I was borrowing stories from my friends about some of the
Yeah.
trauma that they were going through. And I grew up in a fairly stable home. And so when I would hear these stories, I was like, oh my God, like, how did you survive that? How did you
Hmm.
survive the fact that your mom would close herself into a room for days and you had to feed yourself
Hmm.
at 8 or 9 or, however old, 14? And so Callie kind of comes from that, and she had to grow up very quickly. And as a result, those skills that she learned translate to the set.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in terms of how to write that, it sort of just evolved that way because I kept having to dig and dig and dig. And
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of allowing inspiration to hit you and just to listen to it and go with it. And that's what came up for Callie.
Nice. So then
Hmm.
what did the writing process for this book look like? Because you mentioned that you've kind of shifted as you're focusing on new projects, but then how did it
Yeah.
look when you for this very first one?
For this book, I was stealing time whenever I could.
Hmm.
I'm a single mom and I work in TV, so it's a fairly intense job. So oh my God, I would write. When I first moved to LA, I didn't have a car, so I rode the bus. I would write parts of the novel on the bus. I
Okay.
would write it outside my son's taekwondo class. I would steal time at work when I should have been working, and I I wrote this novel instead. So it took me a long time because I was always stealing 10 minutes here, half an hour here, trying to
Hmm.
work on it. So it was very chaotic. But now, because I understand it a little bit better, I have a bit better of a writing practice saying, okay, I'm going to write in this time. And
Hmm.
sorry, my son, you can't talk to me right now. Like, feed yourself. You're old enough. You do it. So it's a little bit more structured now because I understand how much
Hmm.
work and time it takes.
Yeah, that's fair. And like what actually goes into the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, as somebody who's been writing, on and off for most of my life, I also like, when you do 10 minutes, 30 minutes here or there, it doesn't always end up with a novel at the end.
No,
So, yeah.
but it does adds up to something.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
important to do. I mean, I think we're really hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
really that we think, okay, I'm going to write the next great novel with this 2 weeks I have off from
Hmm.
work. And it never works that way because you haven't really built up the muscle to
Yeah.
sit down and write that time. But those 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, they do add up to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, give yourself some slack.
Oh, yeah. And definitely had to like reframe some of it as like, even if I don't use this, this is something figuring out the story or the character in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate that you have to write so much that
Yeah.
doesn't make it into the book. It seems like such a phenomenal waste of time to me, but there is nothing really you can do about it.
Well, I was also going to say it crosses my mind that sometimes, especially like the show The White Lotus just finished, and there's stuff online now about how entire storylines were filmed and cut. And it
Right.
blows my mind that that happens in TV because like the
Hmm.
amount of production
Hmm.
that has to go into like the money and the
Hmm.
time and the
Hmm.
resources used in that.
Hmm.
It's insane to me that you would just cut some parts of that. I
Yeah.
feel like we need to go back to when there was like deleted scenes and just let us have it like on
Yeah.
DVDs. Just put it
Ugh.
on HBO Max. I'll watch them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that whole DVD commentary stuff and deleted scenes, I really miss that whole
Yeah.
package.
Yeah.
It was good at that time. But yeah, yeah, maybe you can ferret it out. Maybe they'll release it on YouTube or something.
Yes. Maybe somebody will leak it. Okay. So then writing process, how do you balance then? Or I guess you're in two industries now that are very dream driven for most people on the outside. I
Mhm,
will agree, like, I
mhm,
think it's very easy to put published authors and writers on a pedestal when you read something by them and like
mhm,
it blows your mind.
mhm,
And you're like, how could any one human do this? And you don't see the
mhm,
full team. In the same way, like,
mhm.
watching a TV show or watching a movie and all of the credit goes to one person, but you don't see, you're like, wow, this single person is, an auteur, but like actually it's a whole team putting this together and like executing this. So, how have you managed to fall into two industries like this? And I shouldn't say fall in because I'm sure it took, but like,
Yeah.
how do you manage the assumptions as well as just the actual work itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really hard. I mean, I just like making things.
Hmm.
So I'm often, again, very naive about the amount of work that takes to make things. But you kind of said the answer right off the bat. It's very collaborative, even
Hmm.
though novel writing is much less collaborative than TV or film. It's still a collaborative process where you have to bring in help. And
Hmm.
that is one thing that you learn. You take the help whenever you can get it because it's exhausting and it's hard and it's tricky being creative because you have to be creative, but then you also have to market yourself and you have to market your
Yeah.
story. And then you have to, if you're doing a film, you have to make sure the props are there. You have to make sure you've got your makeup person, you've got to
Hmm.
have all the pieces in place. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
So just get as much help as you can and be cool with it. I think our society has this idea, and you hit on this, is that one person does everything and
Yeah.
they're the shining example. They're the amazing person who pulled this all together. And it's total bullshit. Like there
Yeah.
is so much support going into every single act of creativity. And the more you kind of give it up, you in terms of like, I'm not the genius behind this. I might be the driving force behind
Hmm.
it, but I'm not like I'm getting so many different ideas and support and help and interest from different people. The more collaborative you can make a thing, then I think it's better. And honestly, I think that's also women tend to collaborate more than
Yeah.
men do. And I think that's hard on the men because I think it's stressful for them because feel they need to be in control of everything.
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
women are a little bit more used to collaborating.
Yeah. I feel like
Mhm.
men have a problem asking for help more than women
Mhm.
do.
Mhm. Yeah, because somewhere along the line, someone told them that it was weak
Yeah.
or that they were wrong or they couldn't do the job.
Hmm.
I mean, that's something that's very interesting to me is male toxicity and how men grow up learning these sort of things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because honestly, I love men. I love them so much. And I have a son and I have two stepsons too. And so
Hmm.
I'm watching these boys grow up and how they try to manage their own personalities in
Hmm.
these very confined boxes that we put men in. And so in my stories and in Jory, that's something that I wanted to look at was what does it mean when you're brought up in an industry that's all men and then
Hmm.
suddenly you have to listen to a different voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I liked in his like, because it's not like he starts out bad and then, Callie fixes him or something like that. Like he
Hmm.
starts out like a decent guy and
Hmm.
then through working with her figures out kind of the spaces where he hasn't been all that great, and not like he's been bad, but he's just been almost neutral,
Hmm.
and how he's able to step
Hmm.
from neutral into like a more actively helpful space. It was
Hmm.
very fun to explore that from his point of view.
Ah, cool. Good. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What was your favorite part of the book to write? Favorite scene or just like element of the writing process? What was your favorite bit?
I really love those bantery scenes
Yeah.
where they're flirting and they're talking really fast. I was a big fan when I was little of romantic comedies from the 40s. Like these Preston Sturges movies that like they just like talk so fast and there's sexual innuendo and they're
Hmm.
hilarious and silly, but also real. And so I really love trying to emulate that. So there's this one scene that I really love. Excuse me, where it's just after they've kissed and Jory's really nervous that Callie's going to report him to HR and they meet at the elevator of their building because they live in the same building because they've been set up in these condos, these kind of production condos that they live in. And they're in the elevator talking about this kiss and they're blaming each other who started it
Yeah.
and they get very frustrated with each other. And the thing I really love about that moment is the elevator is a character in it.
Yes.
Like they
Yes.
keep going for the same button and they don't want to touch each other, so they back away. But then when they get into the elevator, it goes up and the door keeps trying to close on their conversation. And they keep waving the elevator to go back. And it's like the elevator's this like it's like a witness who doesn't want to be there
Yeah.
do this
Very
argument
much trying to end the conversation.
very much trying to just go about its job. And then
Hmm.
finally, when you hit an elevator door too many times, it's just had enough and it just goes
Yeah.
beep, 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 and it slowly closes. And that's what eventually closes the door between them. And then that's what sparks this idea of Jory's that he wants to not back away from
Hmm.
Cali, but he wants to push it even further. So I thought that's I think my favorite scene in the book because of the elevator.
And it's a really strong like Jory for the first time outside of filming stuff has like this very firm decision. He seems to tread water in some of the other places, like the test very
Mhm,
specifically, and it's not until she's there with him more frequently that he's able to step forward and actually do that very scary thing, which
mhm,
granted leads to other stuff, but
mhm.
I don't want to get too into that just in case the book only just came out, so I don't want to, spoil anything.
Right.
But
I mean, I think you can say Jory's going through a health scare.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think like a lot of people, he doesn't want to go for the tests to say yes or
Yeah.
no. He just wants to be in the early space where there's no decision. And I
Hmm.
think that's also reflected in where he is in his career too. He's very gray in his career where
Yeah.
it's not giving him the joy that he used to. He finds he's been kind of ground down by the business a little bit. And so he's just trying to get through his day. And that's another thing that he finds frustrating with Callie is Callie keeps making him think. And he doesn't really want to. Like he
Yeah.
just wants to get through his day. And here's this like little sunshiny newbie director who is trying to make the show better. And he doesn't want to make the show better. He just wants to make the show.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I like that you specify here like the grayness because that's a big thing with him where he talks about the gray or the charcoal moving back in or like the
mhm,
color exploding whenever she's there.
mhm,
And there's this very clear correlation between him being ground down and like how frequent Howard, the shitty executive producer, is showing up,
Hmm.
and then him, being enlivened again through Callie's
Hmm.
behavior. And I kind
Hmm.
of like that we were going back again to the conversation about women being collaborative, more socialized towards collaboration versus men being more socialized towards like almost like
Leadership
isolation.
roles,
Yeah,
isolation. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Um, and where Howard is seeing, you know, almost forcing on Jory that like it has to be all his. And
Hmm.
Callie is like, no, this is all of us. She's very hands-on with everything. I love that very clear distinction.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, like Howard, who is, the villain in the book.
Yeah.
He's the executive producer and he's been there forever. He's very well respected and accomplished, but he's super toxic and
Yeah.
he doesn't like Callie. He doesn't like that she's there, but he puts up with her because he knows he needs a woman in this role for
Hmm.
PR. And he keeps pushing Jory to upset the balance because Jory wants to become a director himself. He thinks that the answer to his grayness is to move out of the director of photography seat and move in to the director seat, which he thinks has more control.
Yeah.
And so Howard is helping him on that. And so Jory's fighting. Jory himself knows that Howard is toxic, but I mean, we've all been in jobs where we know someone's an idiot or a jerk, and you still have to go along with them because they are the boss or they are
Yeah.
your manager or, they're the person you have to work with. And you just have to
Hmm.
suck it up and figure out a way how to work with this person. And so
Yeah.
Jory is feeling that himself.
For sure. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to, I feel like with Jory is that the prospect of fighting this huge, like, it's not always an executive producer, it's not always just a boss, but sometimes the prospect of fighting the idiot is a bigger problem than the idiot's causing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so it was frustrating but fun to watch him navigate that. Because at the end of the day, him fighting this executive producer isn't going to fix the whole industry,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
but he can still help Callie.
Yeah, he can still help Kelly. And I think that's something, it goes back, people talk about advocacy where people feel that they can't advocate for something because they can't change everything.
Yeah.
But then there's this saying that says if you can't change everything, but you can change something. And
Mhm.
Jory tries to change something by supporting Callie. He's at the beginning, he's not really sure why he should be supporting
Mhm.
her because she is kind of getting it up in his business.
Yeah.
But he instinctually helps her out, knowing that that's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then he understands why later. He figures it out.
Yeah, once he's like, "Oh, I'm the problem." Like,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. No, I like that. Okay. So, real quick, rapid fire, a couple questions.
Mm.
If you could only recommend one book for the rest of your life, what book would it be?
You know, uh, it's I one book I always go back to for romantic comedies, and I just think it's perfect the way it's laid out. It's Tessa Dare's um The Duchess Deal. Do
Okay.
you read any historical romance?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Tessa Dare, she hasn't written anything for a long time. I'm not like really not since the pandemic, but she had this run of romantic historical books, and so many of them are so good, and they're all on my best novel kind of list. But The Duchess Deal, I just think it's really perfect. It's a kind of a Beauty and the Beast sort of
Hmm.
retelling with some elements, but it's funny. It's so sexy. Um it's grounded in these really amazing characters and it's just like so fun to read. And I often read it if I get stuck in writing just to see because she's so clean in her scenes and her plotting that I look at that book a lot. Yeah. What would you?
Nice.
What's yours?
So I always recommend The Hollows. I've talked
Oh,
about it several times on the podcast. It's by Kim Harrison.
okay.
It's urban fantasy set in like a kind of like skewed timeline. I think like, like Back to the Future where there's like this like little drop off
Okay.
version of the world where magic is discovered because of genetically modified tomatoes in like the 60s. And so all of like the magic creatures that were like feigning being human had to come
Hmm.
out because they were not dying by this disease and they had to help like the humans survive. And so
Oh,
it's
that's
40
cool.
years after that. It's based around a witch who's a private investigator. And then her two roommates are a vampire and a pixie and his like 20 children. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's
Oh
very
my God.
fun. It's one of
Yeah.
those like there's like 20 books in this series. I think book
Hmm.
18 just came out. I started reading them when I was far too young to have been reading these books. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
reading sex scenes before I started my like should have been reading these things, but
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like that's part of the process. That's
Hmm.
that's just a rite of passage at
Hmm.
this point.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's the one I always recommend.
I'll check them out. I just wrote them down. I wanted to check it
Cool.
out. That's cool.
Okay, so then also there was a theme in the book, a recurring theme of like her full name's Calliope. Her sister does translations. Her sister's also, she goes by Patsy now, but kind of like Cleo and Cleopatra. Was that, what was the thought process behind that?
Well, it's funny that you point that out. Is that when I first started thinking about this, I was thinking of it as a series, and I
Mhm.
was really interested in the Greek muses at the time
Yes.
about, when we think about muses, we often think about them as a male thing, like the
Mhm.
male has the muse to give him inspiration. You think of those 19th century paintings of like
Yeah.
women draped across chaise lounges, and that the mistress was the muse or the wife was the muse or whoever. And I was thinking about, what does it mean for women to have muses? How do women connect to that creative aspect? And so I wanted to kind of set the series with the different types of muses. So Cali is Calliope, as you said, and
Mhm.
Calliope is the kind of head muse of all nine muses. There's nine,
Mhm.
and she kind of organizes everybody. And her sister is Cleo, who is the muse of the written word and translation. And so
Mhm.
she translates ancient Greek texts, which I think, everybody, like as a kid, everybody I think loves the Greek gods. Like there's
Yeah.
just something that you tap into as a little kid where you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then Talia, who is the actress on the
Yeah.
set, is the goddess of comedy, which you don't really see in her character in
Yeah.
this book. But I've started the second book, which is about her and Paolo.
Okay, I was gonna ask, is this one of those like series where we get a different couple for each?
Yeah, yeah, all
Okay.
set in the world. Because in the TV world, there's so many different roles and there's so many different avenues of looking at things. So I wanted to do one about the actor. And then Melanie, who's the producer, which is based on the muse Melpomene, which is the muse of melancholy.
Hmm.
I've got one for her too. So then it was just something that I had in my mind as I was starting it. I didn't know if this was going to become a series. It might not become a series. I don't know. It sort of depends
Okay.
if people want it.
Yeah.
If people want it, then awesome, I'll write it. But it was something I started off thinking about, this idea of inspiration and
Hmm.
creativity, and what does it mean for the muse to inspire women as opposed to men.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah.
I love that. And also I did like Talia and Paolo's. There was like a lot of back and forth and I don't know, maybe it's just that he's like a himbo and I'm down for a himbo. So,
Yeah. Yeah, he's totally a himbo. And deep down, he's actually quite sweet.
okay.
But he's erected all these barriers to kind of
Yeah.
protect himself because he grew up as a very sweet, beautiful child, and he was bullied a lot for
Hmm.
that. And so he had to learn how to be tough, as we tell our boys to be. You have to be
Hmm.
tough. And Talia is a very intellectual actress.
Hmm.
She worked really hard to be where she was. It's very hard for women in the industry to be an actress because not only do you have to be unbelievably gorgeous and thin and small,
Yeah.
um, but you have to be lucky and you have to be extraordinarily talented. So she's worked really, really hard and she's very smart. And she can't stand Paolo. She can't stand him. She thinks he's a
Yeah.
total idiot. And he is completely in love with her because he
Oh,
loves brainy women, even though he knows
yeah.
himself he's not the smartest of guys. But he's very heart smart. He's heart smart. So
Oh, okay.
you just don't see it. So that's kind of the pitch for the next book is that Talia has to get involved more with Paolo. She has to save because there's thoughts that he might be fired because he's not that great of an actor.
Oh
And the
no.
person coming in to replace him is her ex-boyfriend who she loathes. And
Yeah.
so she has to bring Paolo up to speed as an actor so that she can save him in that role because she's like, well, Paolo's an idiot, but it's okay. I can deal with him. I can't have this very awful ex-boyfriend coming in.
Yeah.
So it's an opposites attract story,
Hmm.
and it looks more at the process of what actors have to go through, basically.
Nice. So then
Yeah.
is your goal, I guess with this series, but in general, do you think you're probably going to keep in the like film industry?
Yeah, I think for this series for sure. I've started another series because someone gave me some really good advice about your first novel when you send it out on submission that you start writing something completely different because if
Mm,
the book that you wrote doesn't go and nobody's interested in it at that time, it may go another time, but it's
hmm.
just not going right now, then there's no point in building that series at the
Yeah.
moment. And so I started another story, which is a little bit more on the DL, but it's got a time travel element.
Oh, fun. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But I'll let you know more about that once it gets more shaped.
Okay, cool. I'm
Mhm.
very down. All right.
Okay, cool.
Um, I think that's just about all I've got. That was fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, like your knowledge and thoughtfulness about the book is really great because not too many people spot that muse thing, like that Greek name thing.
Hmm.
So, and it's not something I meant to be really too deep in the book. It was
Oh
more of a
yeah.
guide for myself,
Hmm.
like it was more for me to understand who Kelly was and who her sister is
Hmm.
and how that affects them. So it was very, very astute of you
Well,
to
thank
pick
you.
that
I will say too, there's something, as somebody who was in academia, there's something romantic on Patsy's part about sticking with like, the childhood interest of Greek and Roman myths and letting that be her guide.
up.
Will there be a book about her in the future?
I hope so. I mean, I kind of hint at it in the epilogue
Yeah.
that she's hired as a consultant on a show
Yeah.
for the Greek myths. And uh, I kind of based her character very lightly on a Canadian poet named Anne Carson,
Oh
who
yeah.
writes these poems. Do you know Anne Carson?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like a brainiac.
Hmm.
She speaks ancient Greek and Latin and is completely so well thought of in academia, but she's also written all these poetry books that are very different. Like
Yeah.
they kind of break the mold to poetry and they bring in, script dialogue or they bring in novel dialogue or documentary dialogue all in this kind of beautiful artistic package. Now, I can't measure up to that in any way, anytime. She's like a goddess
Yeah.
of creativity. But I sort of based Patsy a little bit lightly on her and that joy of translation, the joy of the ancients, those old stories and what they mean to us now, and what that means for our stories going forward.
I love that. I love that so much. And I really hope we get future books. So fingers crossed.
All right. Well, I'll tell the publishers
Thanks.
that Melissa
Tell them Melissa
said.
said.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
this has been great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. As usual, you are welcome on whenever because I really enjoy this.
Awesome.
Yes.
Me too.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and happy reading. Thank you for joining me for another episode of In Bed with Books, a bookish podcast for bookish babes. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of the latest updates. And if you have any suggestions for authors, books, or topics that you want to hear about on the podcast, then feel free to DM me on Instagram or shoot me an email. I'm wishing you a lovely rest of your day, and until next time, happy reading.